Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session of Guildmaster Gaming. Today, I'm talking about another film that we had an opportunity to see at Film Quest, and with the director of Rejected, Rene Rivas, who we had a chance to talk some at Film Quest too. But let me start out by having you introduce yourself and tell us about your film.
Well, Daniel, I just want to say thank you for having me on the show, and it was great to meet you this past couple months ago at Film Quest. Total blast. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, but the newest production that we are currently touring in the festival circuit is called Rejected. And what Rejected is, it's essentially a mini anthology horror parody that is spoofing a 1997 digital camera. And it's, as mentioned, it's a mini anthology. So it's essentially three fake commercials that go horribly wrong, where um, three individual sets of folks are promoting this camera, and then mayhem ensues, and all hell breaks loose, and there's blood. It's pretty brutal, but there's a good amount of comedy peppered in there as well. But yeah, it's spoofing this guy right here,
Oh my, the Sonu.
the Sonu. But
So it's
yeah,
it's it's really quite the interesting film because you don't usually see too many times where people attempt to do an anthology. There's been a couple of times for political purposes or other things, but you tackle doing an anthology in a short film with three short films. I have a feeling that that had some interesting difficulties in pulling that together in terms of the writer and making cohesiveness through it all.
you know, I talked a little bit about this at Film Quest. So the kind of impetus and idea behind the whole um, structure of Rejected was stemmed from the second segment, and I'm not going to say too much of what the segment entails, but it's in the woods, and um, the short film essentially started off as one singular segment, and I wanted to expand upon that world and dive deeper into the sandbox. And parody and satire has been around for eons, 30, 40, 50 years, if not longer. And this was just a fun new challenge for my team and I. Typically the productions that we've taken on in the past have been relatively serious, kind of on the more serious edge as far as tonality. But Rejected is just bonkers. It's out there, it's fun. And it really kind of gave me a platform to kind of poke fun at myself. And, all of us filmmakers sometimes take ourselves too seriously. And this was really an exercise on just kind of letting the hair down and having tons of fun on this one. So it was a blast, and it was challenging, as far as the writing. As soon as the first story was complete, a couple of months had gone by, and I sat back down in the coffee shop. I was like, all right, let's further expand this thing. And it ended up turning into two and then three segments. And then later on, we tied it together with a wraparound that kind of intertwined everything. And it's a fun little cohesive, blood spattered, funny short film that our team worked our tails off to get to the finish line.
So you got it to the finish line, you got it at Film Quest, and that's where we had a chance to meet. But during the screening, uh, was whereabouts in your film festival, journey is Rejected right now?
Um, so we started our festival journey. It is now December 2024. I would say we started our festival journey in July.
Okay. I
Um,
just wanted
so
to ask that first because I was wondering, you get it to Film Quest, and it's known for having quite a savvy genre audience, especially when dealing with horror. Um, what was your anticipation and expectations, and were they met, or what kind of caught you off guard there watching the audience reaction?
I first and foremost, what Jonathan has curated pertaining to the programming, ranging from multiple genres to the community efforts that he's put together. I've been to a lot of film festivals, and Film Quest and Nightmares are definitely the upper echelon and best film festivals I've ever been to regarding the experience that I took from it. And it was just a really great time for both festivals. But Film Quest, um, I didn't really have a lot of anticipation. I was just kind of like, don't stoke yourself out and get too nervous about this because at the end of the day, these are all genre nuts and they're here for genre and they love genre. And it was just a tremendous honor for our team to get into Film Quest. And, I was just there with open arms and ready to share as everyone there, ready to share our slice of passion and share our wacky narrative that our team put together. And it was really gratifying, at the end of the day, like as a writer director, I thrive on seeing how people react. I think this is I think a practice of every writer director. But anytime I have a public viewing of any of the productions that I put together, I open up the iPhone voice recorder and I set it on my lap and I hit record. And then after the fact, I go back to the hotel room or I go back to my home here and I Bluetooth it to a speaker and I listen to how people react to each beat to see what worked, what didn't work. And I'm pretty pleased to say that Rejected seems to have been pretty well received and it's still being well received and it makes me feel really really great and inspired about the production that we took a big swing testing the waters on these new genres. I mean, we've been playing around in horror for a while, but horror parody comedy, it's a pretty difficult amalgamation to play around with, and I think we stuck the landing on this one, and Film Quest seemed to have had a great time with it.
Yeah. Horror and comedies always makes a great pairing, but I think I agree with you that the beats have to hit just right. Otherwise, it comes off a little trying to get the right way, but just as a bad taste in your mouth, as the one way I guess kind of put it. And
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I feel like the ratio, I feel like we stuck the landing on the ratio as far as like peppering in the horror beats and the comedy beats, and it's a nice
Hmm.
diverse. Um, there's a lot of diversity with it, and there's beats of comedy, horror, suspense, dread, a little bit of romance. It's kind of a mixed bag of a lot of different things.
Yeah. And it does hit it all very well. So I mean, you've
Thank you.
created this nice little anthology of the three segments, and it's all bracketed into its own little television show, talking about them. Now you mentioned that this all started with one of those segments that you wanted to branch out with that. Have you thought about doing more in this universe, or maybe trying to go on to like an anthology feature?
Absolutely. For me personally, Rejected was more or less a 2 year adventure living in this wacky world for about 2 years. So I'm pretty ready and I'm ultimately foaming at the mouth to move on to the next. But I would love to jump back into the Rejected world. And coincidentally enough, this film used to be called Rejected Mavica Ads because we're spoofing the Sony Mavica, and our camera is called the Sony Mavic O. So it used to be called Rejected Mavica Ads, and then I just reduced it just because that's just a verbose uh, title and just called it Rejected. And I thought about it, I was like, holy cow, like this could be its own little universe of spoofing all kinds of products. We could do one Rejected, the 70s edition that spoofs a record player, the 80s that spoofs a VCR, So it could open itself up to a lot of different possibilities. But as of right now, it feels great to put this one to bed, to finally release it out into the world so that we can move forward on to the next productions. And if opportunity presents itself where somebody wants to expand the universe, hell yeah, I would love to dive back into this. And it took about a year and a half. The whole rejected chapter lasted about 2 years from first writing the first screenplay treatment up until completion, it was about 2 years. And it took that long because, as independent filmmakers, independently financing your productions, it's difficult. and it
Mhm.
kind of prolongs it at certain times. We did raise a little bit of capital at the very beginning of the project, but that was gone like that within like the first round of production. And then it's like, all right, time to bust out the credit card and max it out again and give your bank account the collective oof. But that's what we have to do. You know, we work our day jobs to save money, to put money aside to make productions and pay for everything else on credit cards.
It's amazing how many creative types of all types, not just film. I hear that from is, and it's always kind of fun because working with creative artists of all types, it's one of the few areas you can ask people, so what do you do for your day job?
So as far as for me, my day job is I'm an owner operator of a small film production company called Rene Rivas Productions, Arizona based. I was Flagstaff based for 13 and a half years,
Yeah.
incorporated in 2017. I do, these days, since I've been in Tucson, I'm more in the corporate space. But since I've started the production company, we've done music videos, weddings, uh, what else? I'm brain farting right now. Real estate, event coverage, sports. It's kind of like everything that kind of comes our way, we've produced. But these days, I like to navigate in the corporate space to pay the
Okay.
bills. But
It's it's a nice way of making sure you get paid, right?
they certainly pay more than indie rock bands. And I love producing music videos. I actually haven't done one in a while, but yeah. And I actually had to do for a while the Uber grind, driving Uber in between my production company gigs just to pay the bills and save up to buy all the gear that I've, been breaking my back to save up and buy for 7, 8 years now. But I feel like I'm ready. I'm going to be 40 years old in April, and it's like, all right, time to pump the brakes on investing in your production company. You have a nice little 1 ton kit. Start making some movies.
Yeah. And
So
it's actually not a bad way like you're talking about. I have an author friend that drove Uber. And so he started talking with his passengers and he turned those stories into a collection of stories that he sells as a book.
that's smart.
So maybe there's your next anthology.
It's a possibility. It's a possibility.
The Bad Lift.
Oh boy.
So back to your film now with Rejected. You started about halfway through 2024 into the film festivals. And so, you're moving along. Moving forward, do you have any other festivals that you can tell us that people can pick this up at?
Yeah, so I think I started submitting in June and we started getting into our first festivals come Sep July. No, in July, and then we started getting into some of our festivals in August.
Okay.
Um, I mean, there's festivals that we're going to hear back from all the way up until like August 2025. But we did land some pretty exciting news that I can't divulge in just yet, but
Not yet.
Rejected, thankfully found a really exciting home. It's a platform that I've been wanting
Ah,
to get production on for many years now. And they approached us after Nightmares and said, we think this would be a good fit. We loved your film. And how's about a November 2024 release? And I said, well, look, can we pump the brakes on that release date? Because I'd like a couple more film festivals under our belt. So I think we are gearing up for a January release, wide release of Rejected on this specific platform, which we'll
all
be
right.
announcing here pretty soon. But looking
So
at my,
you so where could they, if anybody's seeing this, wants to check it out, where could they follow and get that information from when you make that announcement?
so I typically announce everything on my personal Facebook page or my Rene Rivas Productions Instagram, which is at Rene Rivas Productions or at Rene __ Rivas. I'm pretty transparent with the festival updates,
Hmm.
but yeah, I mean, I we still got a good amount of festivals to hear back from, but typically what I've done in the past is I run the whole festival adventure and then release after the festival, but I don't necessarily want to do that as much this time because there's a lot of collective excitement under the film currently. So
Yeah.
I want to release it sooner than later. And then when we release it, if we're null and void from certain festivals, it's the way it goes because we already landed an awesome distribution pickup,
Yep.
which is going to get us a lot of built-in eyes. Um, but yeah,
Okay, that's great.
looking at March, April, July. Yeah, September 28th, 2025 is our final film festival. Um,
If it happens.
if it happens, I mean, there's at least 50 festivals that we have to hear back from.
Well, that's great news that you've already got distribution lined up and probably going to go that route. That's going to open it up in a lot of different ways. So if that means you're kind of like you were saying, you're chomping at the bit now to do something now, what's next up for Renee?
So, um, before I dive into the bigger production, um, I told myself I was going to pump the brakes on short narrative for a while, but I think I can speak for everybody that's a creative. I can't put the creative mind to bed. So I'm kind of secretly going into production on a little fun uh, adventure this week. About 3 nights ago, I committed to the idea of making a fake Grindhouse Christmas horror trailer, very much along the lines of what Eli Roth did with Thanksgiving. And it's not parody per se, but it's very self-aware and it's very satirical. And it's just kind of spoofing, Santa Slayers. We love them. They're a bit ubiquitous and they're everywhere at this point. So I'm doing a Grindhouse early 1980s fake movie trailer. Currently, we go back into production this Thursday, and it'll probably be like 2 minutes when it's done, and it involves a Santa Slayer. And I just had this idea pop into my head like 3 or 4 nights ago, like, oh, it'd be funny if I made a fake trailer called Santa Slayer Part 6, Sledgehammer Christmas, and I thought about it, scripted it out, made a shot list, and I was like, all right, I'm committing to doing this, and hopefully I'll get it done in time and release it publicly on Christmas Day. But we'll see. Every genre of filmmaker wants to make something on Christmas, and um, yeah, it's gonna be funny. It's gonna be self-aware, and there's gonna be a title card that's like from the company that brought you the original Santa slasher, something along the lines of that. But yeah, I'm gonna do a fake trailer to or a trailer to a fake movie and release it next week if I can get my ducks in a row. But that is kind of the palate cleanser of Rejected. Um, Super small scale, just a fun little weekend project. And the next big thing is feature. So, I've done 7 or 8 short narratives in a row. I did do a feature film back in 2015, 2016 era that actually finally just got released. So it never got released. And about 4 or 5 months ago, I kind of shifted my perspective on it on, oh, maybe one day somebody will pick it up. I was like, fuck that. I'm gonna upload this thing to what's it called? To Film Hub and take distribution into my own hands. So I took my feature film called Northern, uploaded it to Film Hub, and now it's streaming on Amazon Prime and it's streaming on Tubi and a bunch of other platforms. It's a little rough around the edges and it's representative of where I was as a filmmaker back in, almost 9, 10 years ago. But it's still an endearing little film. And yeah, humble beginnings. So made a feature back then, which you can now see now. Check out Northern. It's a black and white horror, not horror, suspense, drama, noir that has some sci-fi tinge to it. And what's next is a feature about a rock band circa 1992. And the rock band is they essentially have a single on their hands that's rising in the charts, and they get approached by a major label to get signed to the label and to produce the first music video for the band to debut on not MTV in our script, but it's MVT, music video television, to get their first music video produced with a huge budget. So it's essentially a story of a rock band that has a silver spoon handed to them. Everything is going great until disaster strikes, and it becomes a Murphy's Law scenario of what can go wrong will go wrong. It's at its core, it's a suspense thriller, but it does have a lot of horror tropes in it, so it is horror adjacent. But the way I was pitching it, I love Saulnier, Jeremy Saulnier's film, so it's more or less a love letter to Green Room meets Good Time with Robert Patterson meets a splash of Mandy with Nicolas Cage, because there is a hefty dose of LSD peppered out throughout the narrative of this feature.
Mhm.
So at its core, it's a revenge thriller, but yeah, it involves a rock band that fucks up and keeps fucking up, and everything just gets worse and worse and worse. And it's titled Grunge. Um, wrote the first draft about a year and a half ago, and I've just been finessing it. I'm currently at draft 13, and I just got my second round of coverage on it. So in the next week or so, my plan is to rent a log cabin up on Mount Lemon, which is about an hour away. And just, I've always wanted to do that. I feel like that's the writer's retreat dream for every screenwriter, is just to go to a desolate location with no internet, open up your word processor, get your coverage notes, and just drink coffee and focus. So I'm about to do that after Christmas, maybe before. We'll see, but no, after Christmas, we're filming a Christmas trailer, and really dial in draft 14 and submit that to some associates that are waiting for the newest draft at the end of the month. And yeah, we'll see what happens. I I don't want to jump into too much of what happened, but a pretty unique opportunity presented itself from Film Quest that never would have happened if I didn't attend Film Quest. But I got to pitch my feature Grunge to some associates that are involved with a pretty ubiquitous magazine.
Yep.
And I'm that's all I want to say, because I'm just knocking on wood. I don't want to count, eggs before they hatch. And they really liked the pitch and they liked the production. So now it's my responsibility to get this draft as sharp as it can be to represent it to people. And hopefully in 2025 we're making a feature film.
Yeah. So, you've mentioned Film Quest a couple of times, and it sounds like there's to kind of put it out to people, there's a lot of great opportunities for networking at these sorts of events. Sounds like you picked up some pretty good friendships along the way there.
You know, I've said this for years about film festivals. Film festivals ultimately feel like summer camp for filmmakers. And while the programming is one facet of the festival, and it's bar none, the most talented people under one roof playing their productions. And I was super inspired seeing all this great work. But at the end of the day, it's the networking aspect that is equally as, if not even more important, the relationships that you build, the creatives that you link up with and potentially produce stuff with, co-write with, co-direct with, XYZ. And that's something that was really a standout facet of Film Quest for me, was the people that I met and just the community. The community it was amazing.
Okay. So, you talk about Film Quest, and I see you're wearing Fangoria, and the Rejected was a horror setup, and you're kind of doing it in that way. What is the draw of horror for you?
Um, the draw of horror, ultimately, at the end of the day, I do want to direct in multiple genres. But as of right now, and speaking back to when I was just a little kid, I've been a horror nut since I was afraid of VHS box tapes walking through the mom and pop VHS store. Sneaking away when I would go with my mom to the grocery store to secretly read Fangoria magazine. And horror has just kind of always been there for us outsiders. I would think that I might be the black sheep of the family, but horror has just kind of always been there, and it's a personal ambition and dream of mine to get featured in Fangoria one of these days. And I don't know, I just love horror. It's just as with any genre, it's escapism, but ultimately it's a roller coaster ride that thrills you and chills you from the confines of your own safe home. And then when the credits roll, you turn it off and everything's all good. It's just a fun roller coaster ride for me personally. And I really, as a writer director, I really gravitate to giving an audience that sense of dread, seeing how they react to thrills and chills. Um, I have been playing around with exploitation with Rejected and a couple films in the past, but Blood and Guts is one thing, but as far as my personal style and sensibility as a director, I love dread, suspense, drama. That's my type of filmmaking. And the Blood and Guts, that's fun. That's just one piece of the pie, and I have been kind of having fun with that lately. But at the end of the day, it's just exploitation. I like keeping audiences on the edges of their seat, and that's ultimately the kind of stories I want to tell, and that's very much what type of story grunge is. It's just prolonged suspense. It's escalating action. It's what can go wrong, will go wrong. It's when the fuck is the bomb going to go off underneath the table type of a mentality.
They talk about sneaking off and reading Fangoria and, checking out the VHS cartons and everything. What movies back then were the ones that were your favorites that kind of maybe drove you into the direction of horror, or maybe even drove you in the direction of wanting to move into filmmaking?
Um, that's a good question. Well, John Carpenter's Halloween has always been my crown jewel. And I'll make this story quick, but when I was a really little kid, probably 3 or 4 years old, I was living in Nogales, Arizona at the time. And, at such an impressionable age, you don't know what horror is, you don't know what movies are. But I specifically remember, my parents were in the living room watching something, but something was on the TV in their master bedroom across the house. And I heard this weird piano theme. And I, little kid, tiptoed into the room and I heard this piano thing and I saw like 3 or 4 minutes of the third act chase, not entirely knowing what it was that I was watching, but getting the taste of that, chasing the dragon for the first time, being actually scared at what this was. Like, what is this that I'm looking at? I don't know, but I'm scared right now. I think that was kind of the impetus behind the thrill of loving horror, of inadvertently walking in and seeing a little piece of John Carpenter's Halloween on Telemundo because it was in Spanish and it had English subtitles, I remember. Um, but yeah, I think that was the very beginning of the love of the genre, which is horror. And films. I love all genres of films. In my Blu-ray collection of 500 plus Blu-rays and 4Ks, there's all kinds of genres. I love Westerns. They're just films. But right
Okay.
now I'm putting my energy into uh, freaking people out.
So as you're moving forward doing that, you said you wanted to be like maybe in Fangoria or maybe someplace else being highlighted. If you had your dream project to work on, be it your own or in somebody else's IP, what would be your dream project of a film?
I don't know if this is considered a lazy answer, but I think it would be grunge. At the end of the day, I did do a feature that was super rough around the edges with no name talent, and it's a fun little film, but ultimately having my first legitimate production, with a full team, a respectable budget, and actually do it right. I haven't had that opportunity yet. I'm always going to be an independent filmmaker, but I've always been breaking the bank and just doing it that way to make these short narratives. But my dream project is to have somebody see that I have talent to want to help me take it to that next level of creating an original narrative feature and creating our own IPs. And I'm just not quite there yet. I'm 39 right now. I'll be 40 in April. I feel like my 30s were developing my chops as a writer director. In my 20s, I did the rock band thing as a drummer for 5 years. And when I was 25 years old, that's kind of when the light bulb went off that I want to be a film director. So my later 20s was like kind of shifting from focusing on 100% on music to like camera work and editing. And then my 30s was actually uh, really developing the storytelling muscle and directing muscle. But yeah, it'd be rad to do grunge next year. And if I ever had the opportunity to do a remake of something, uh, I always kind of defaulted to it would be so much fun to get a chance to do a Maximum Overdrive remake or like a the Blob remake with just goopy practical the whole time. And I'm a practical kid, man. I mean, being a baby of the mid 80s and child of the 90s, that's what I grew up on, practical. And um, a lot of my film productions are very hinged in practical.
Okay.
And that's how I want to keep the flavor.
There's a lot of that coming back I've seen. So yeah, I think you're not alone in wanting to do that. So we've kind of talked about what your big project is and what you've got coming forward and you're working on and where you've come from. So I mean it's kind of just winding down now. So one question I usually ask everybody, because you've got a very unique path of how you became into a filmmaking from the way it sounds. If someone was to come to you and say, "Hey, I want to be a filmmaker," what advice would you give them?
I would say I would say you don't need film school to be a filmmaker. I personally never went to film school. I'm self-taught. There's a lot of free resources with a lot of terrific information on the internet now. There's a lot of YouTube channels that are wealths of knowledge for up and coming and budding filmmakers like Film Riot, D for Darius. What are some other ones? It's been a minute. Indie Mogul. There's so much free information out there that, film school would be, I don't want to knock on anybody that's been to film school. If I had the opportunity to give that a go, I would have, but I've been kind of like a grassroots, make mistakes and learn as you go filmmaker path. But at the end of the day, you do not need film school. Um, Bust out your word processor if you have an idea in your head, even if you're using Microsoft Word or a piece of paper and pencil, get an idea out, give it a three structure, um, figure out your ending, your intro, and figure out the middle and connect the dots and tell a story. It's it's just a matter of, when people approach me saying, I want to be a filmmaker, like, how do I start? You literally just have to start. You have to start and fail and start and fail and start and fail. And the way, like, I remember like, I personally I wasn't a filmmaker when people were shooting on film and 16 and Bolexes and all that good stuff. I've always been a digital filmmaker. But the resources that we have at our disposal these days, you would be basically just making excuses not to be a filmmaker. Like the iPhone 13 Pro Max shoots 4K ProRes, which is fucking bananas. And back in 2022, after we did a psychological horror thriller called Judy, my then palette cleanser was a little micro horror film called 103185. That was a period piece that took place in 1985, and I shot the whole thing on my iPhone 13 Pro Max. And it's on YouTube right now, so you should definitely check that out. But That's at the end of the day, my humble advice is just dive in. Just dive in. Use your camera, use your phone as a camera to start. Nothing wrong with that. Learn the rudiments of lighting, learn the rudiments of storytelling. Get a tripod, get a couple friends together on the weekend, shoot it in your home. Um, as far as some, as far as from some insight pertaining to writing, don't write beyond your means. Like, don't write a script that involves plane crashes and volcanoes exploding. Write something that's grounded. Write something that takes place in a bathroom or sitting in a vehicle. Some stuff that you have access to. Um, and just off to the races you go. There's no reason to not make films. I guess I think I answered your question.
Oh yeah.
You
So I
know,
mean,
we're
we go ahead.
we're sitting here talking into a webcam. There's been people making films through webcams, which it isn't 100% my favorite form of narrative, but there's a lot of ways to make films these days, and it's just a matter of committing to it, drinking a cup of coffee, getting that vision together, and fucking diving in.
Just get it going. It's the same thing we kind of talk about with writers that I work with is, you can't edit a blank page, so you got to write something out there and go with it.
10
So,
out of
yeah.
10.
So, we've been talking for about a half hour now. So I'm going to kind of wrap things up for you as we move on to other things. But to throw out one final, let you kind of give your final comments of anything you would like to say, any thanks you would like to give. I kind of joke with everybody and say, this is your chance to practice your Oscar speech. So,
Um, I just want to thank everybody that has uh, been with me on this journey and likes what we produce. And hopefully we can keep doing this until the wheels fall off. Keep making short narratives, hopefully make more feature narratives and kind of live in that space for a while and just kind of keep building and building and building and make some films that'll make lasting impressions and have people add them to their Blu-ray collections. I think that answered it, but it's a journey. You know, as far as like the intrinsic value as a filmmaker, I love the process of filmmaking. I love starting it, being in the minutia of it, completing it. That is my favorite portion. Like, yeah, I make a post every now and then, like if we win like an award, which is rad, everybody likes a pat in the back, but for me, like awards are um they're secondary, they're negligible. It's the journey. That is the important thing. It's like once you get any kind of recognition, it's like, thank you. What's next? Like got to keep going. Forward motion. Let's get on set. I can't wait for this Thursday so we can make a fake horror movie trailer and release it on Christmas and then switch gears and then go up to the cabin and keep finessing this feature screenplay to do that. It's never ending.
sounds like quite a bit of work you got going on there. But from what we saw of Rejected, you're succeeding at it. You've got that coming out. It sounds like it's going to be coming out on a platform at the start of the new year's that everybody can watch out for. And to follow that, they can follow you on Facebook or on Instagram to get that type of information. So if it does end up still in the festivals, definitely get out there and get a look at this. It's a lot of fun, and I'll admit the audience reaction going from the different segments was really an interesting, like you said, a roller coaster ride of how they were playing it up and playing it down. It
Yeah,
was a
it's
lot of
it's
fun.
well, I appreciate the kind words. Here, I'm gonna commemorate this really quick.
I'll admit, you're making me a little bit nervous using that camera. Okay, and I'll say this now to everybody. Thank you for joining us on this segment of Guildmaster Gaming, talking with Rene and about Rejected. Keep an eye out for his work coming up. I think we're going to see a lot of great things from you, Rene, and I'm looking forward to it. And so, everybody else, Thank you, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks again, Dan.